Have you ever poured your heart and soul into a 6-year marriage, only to be dismissed with the line, "We're not a match because you can't bear a son"? Have you ever blacked out the moment you signed divorce papers and woken up to find you were carrying an unexpected pair of twins? Have you ever been belittled by your in-laws and betrayed by your husband, left with a mere $20,000 in compensation, forced to shoulder pregnancy, home buying, and childbirth all alone? I'm Mia Carter, 35 years old, a structural engineer who spent a full decade at a regional architectural design firm. 3 months ago, the second I signed my name on the divorce papers at the county clerk's office, my vision blurred and my knees buckled, and I crumpled to the cold linoleum floor. When I woke up in the hospital, a doctor handed me an ultrasound scan and delivered news that split my world open. I was 2 months pregnant with twins. The man who'd pushed for our split, claiming I couldn't give him a son, had already become my ex-husband, Ethan Wilson. The night that sealed our fate began with a dinner no one truly wanted to share. Ethan's mother, Mrs. Wilson, had simmered a pot of pork bone soup that afternoon. I'd pulled overtime until 8:30, buried under structural load calculations for a mid-rise residential project, and the rich, meaty aroma hit me the second I twisted the front doorknob. Mrs. Wilson sat alone at the dining table, 2 place settings laid out before her, one for herself, the other empty, as if I didn't exist in the 4 walls of the home I'd helped pay the mortgage on for 6 years. "You're home," she said, her gaze flicking over me without a shred of warmth, flat as if speaking to thin air. "Sit and eat." I slipped off my scuffed work flats, washed my hands at the kitchen sink, and slid into the chair across from her. Besides the giant pot of oversalted soup, there was only a small plate of wilted bok choy and a tiny ceramic dish of pickled salted vegetables. After 6 years of marriage, this routine was etched into my bones. Mrs. Wilson never set 3 places, always acting as though Ethan ate all his meals out, never once considering I'd work late and need a proper meal waiting for me. "Where's Ethan?" I asked quietly, picking up my ceramic soup spoon. "Working overtime," she replied, gnawing slowly on a pork rib, bone scraping against her teeth. "He's swamped right now. Don't pester him with constant questions." I clamped my mouth shut and sipped the broth. The salt burned my throat, sharp and overwhelming, but I said nothing. Over the years, trapped in this suffocating household, I'd learnt survival. Silence was the only shield against endless criticism and blame. We ate in stiff quiet for several minutes before Mrs. Wilson set her chopsticks down with a sharp clink and let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. Her eyes locked hard onto my flat stomach, every word sharp with unspoken judgment. "Mia, you've been married to my son 6 years now, haven't you?" My heart sank straight to my gut. Every single time she spoke in that soft, sorrowful tone, a lecture or accusation was guaranteed to follow. I tightened my grip around the spoon until my fingernails dug faint crescent indents into my palm. "That's right, 6 years. 6 years, and your belly's never carried a single child." Her voice stayed low, but each syllable drove into my skull like rusted nails. I went to the fertility clinic myself to ask questions, and the doctor confirmed the problem isn't Ethan. "Tell me, what's wrong with you?" Tears stung the backs of my eyes, but I forced my voice steady, desperate to defend myself. "I've had full fertility screenings twice. Both doctors said Ethan and I are completely healthy. We just need more time." "More time?" She cut me off, slamming her bowl lightly against the table edge. "I'm over 60 years old, and all I've ever wanted is a grandson to hold. Look at the Wilsons next door. Their daughter-in-law had a boy the 2nd year after marrying, and that kid's running around the neighborhood playing with toy trucks now. This house? dead silent, not a single baby's cry to fill the empty rooms. A thick lump swelled in my throat, trapping every rebuttal I wanted to voice. There was no point arguing with her anyway, her mind was already made up. I know your engineering job pays well and makes you feel important, but what good's a career for a woman? She took another big gulp of salty soup, her tone turning cold and unyielding. At the end of the day, women exist to have children. I'll be plain with you. If you can't bear a son, don't hold Ethan back. He's still young. He can't spend his whole life without an heir. In that moment, I felt less like a wife and more like a flawed household appliance set out on a store shelf, marked defective and ready to be returned for a newer, better model that could fulfill its sole required function. I've talked to Ethan about this already, I tried, clinging to the faint hope my husband might side with me. He said we didn't need to rush into kids. A thick lump swelled in my throat, trapping every rebuttal I wanted to voice. There was no point arguing with her anyway, her mind was already made up. I know your engineering job pays well and makes you feel important, but what good's a career for a woman? She took another big gulp of salty soup, her tone turning cold and unyielding. At the end of the day, women exist to have children. I'll be plain with you. If you can't bear a son, don't hold Ethan back. He's still young. He can't spend his whole life without an heir. In that moment, I felt less like a wife and more like a flawed household appliance set out on a store shelf, marked defective and ready to be returned for a newer, better model that could fulfill its sole required function. I've talked to Ethan about this already, I tried, clinging to the faint hope my husband might side with me. He said we didn't need to rush into kids. He might not rush, but I do. Mrs. Wilson's palm crashed down hard on the wooden table, rattling bowls and silverware, together with a shrill clatter. I raised that boy single-handedly after his father passed away. He owes me a healthy grandson to carry our family name. I flinched backward in my chair, startled by her sudden outburst, just as the front door's lock twisted open. Ethan stepped inside, loosening the knot of his work tie, and froze when he saw our tense, hostile standoff across the dining table. "What's going on here?" He sounded drained, worn thin from long office hours, no energy left to mediate our fights. "Ask her," his mother shot to her feet, jabbing a finger straight at my chest. I was trying to talk to her about having grandchildren, and she talked back to me. I hadn't argued at all. I'd only spoken one single sentence to explain my doctor's report, yet I knew better than to defend myself. In this house, my perspective never mattered, and every word I said would only fuel more anger from his mother. Ethan glanced between his furious mother and my red, watery eyes, then exhaled a long, defeated breath. "Mum, can we hash this out later? I'm exhausted from work today." Mrs. Wilson huffed a bitter, dismissive sound, gathered her dishes, and stormed into the kitchen, leaving me alone with the half-empty pot of soup and a roiling wave of nausea twisting through my stomach. That night, Ethan dragged his blankets into the spare study to sleep on the couch. I laid awake in our shared bed, staring blankly up at the popcorn-textured ceiling. A thin strip of pale moonlight seeped through the gap between the window curtains, stretching a cold white line across the hardwood floor. My mind drifted back to our wedding 6 years prior, to Ethan kneeling on one knee, clutching a cheap silver ring and promising he'd protect me from every hardship life could throw our way. Silent tears soaked through the cotton pillowcase beneath my head, cold and sticky against my cheek. I replayed every detail of my life over those 6 years, searching for the mistake I'd made. I held a stable, high-paying career, split the mortgage payments evenly, kept the house spotlessly clean, never splurged on unnecessary luxuries, and avoided conflict at every cost. Yet all my effort, all my compromise, all my quiet sacrifice meant absolutely nothing, simply because I hadn't given birth to a son. The afternoon we finalized the divorce began with a single text message from Ethan, sent to my work phone mid-project review. "Come home tonight. I need to talk to you." My fingers trembled slightly as I typed back a short, resigned all right. Deep down, I already knew exactly what awaited me at that house. Instead of driving straight home after clocking out, I sat alone in the booth of a cafe down the street from the design firm for an hour, staring out the fogged window at rush-hour traffic streaming past. The sweet milk tea I'd ordered turned cold on the table before me, its flavor gone flat, matching the hollow numbness settling deep in my chest. Only once the sky faded to deep gray did I drag myself back to the neighborhood I'd once called home. When I pushed open the front door, Mrs. Wilson and Ethan sat side by side on the living room sofa. Centered on the coffee table rested a thick stack of printed papers, 2 bold black words printed across the top header. Divorce agreement. Ethan stared at the floor, too ashamed to meet my gaze, his voice small and hollow. "Mia, my mum's right. We aren't a good match for each other." I stood frozen in the entryway, staring at the man I'd loved for 8 years total, staring at the document that erased every shared memory we'd built together. A bitter, hollow laugh bubbled up inside me. 6 years of marriage, endless quiet nights, all the meals I'd cooked, all the bills I'd split, reduced to 2 meaningless words: not a match. "Skim through the terms and sign if you don't have objections," Mrs. Wilson said, sliding a black fountain pen across the table toward me, her tone dripping with a patronizing pity. "Don't worry yourself over money. The down payment on this house came from our savings, but you've covered a portion of the monthly mortgage over the years. Ethan agreed to give you a one-time settlement of $20,000. $20,000. That was the price tag they'd stuck on 6 years of my youth, 6 years of swallowing my pride, 6 years of endless unspoken suffering." I stepped forward and picked up the stack of papers, flipping page after page slowly. I didn't absorb a single word of the legal jargon, only dragging out the process to buy myself a few extra seconds to brace for the heartbreak ahead. After a long stretch of heavy silence, Ethan finally lifted his head, his eyes glistening with manufactured remorse. "I'm so sorry, Mia." I refused to look at him. I gripped the pen tight and scrawled my full signature across the blank line reserved for the plaintiff. The soft scratch of ink against paper sounded thin and delicate, yet it carved a raw, permanent gash straight through my heart. Once I finished signing, I stood and turned toward the front door, ready to gather my belongings. "Where are you going?" Mrs. Wilson called after me. "To pack my things." "No need," she replied flatly. "I boxed all your stuff up days ago. It's sitting by the front door." I pulled the door open, spotting 2 large rolling suitcases lined against the wall, coated in a thin layer of household dust. She'd been waiting for this moment for weeks, fully prepared to kick me out the second I put my name on the paperwork. I grabbed the suitcase handles and stepped into the elevator, and the dam holding back my tears burst completely. As the metal elevator doors slid shut between us, I heard Mrs. Wilson's relieved murmur drift through the narrow crack. Finally, some peace and quiet around here. My cell phone rang before I even made it to the building lobby, Ethan's name lighting up the screen. "Mia, are you okay? I'll drive over to pick you up right now." "I'm fine," I answered, my voice eerily calm, no tremor or sob betraying how shattered I felt. "You don't need to come. I can get myself." Darkness swallowed my vision mid-sentence, and my body went limp, collapsing onto the concrete lobby floor. When consciousness returned, Harsh fluorescent hospital lights burned my eyes, and the sharp chemical stench of antiseptic filled my nostrils. A female doctor in scrubs pulled a chair beside my hospital bed, holding a blurry black and white ultrasound image in her hand. "You're awake," she said gently. "Do you know you're pregnant?" My mind went blank, every thought grinding to a halt. She held the scan closer so I could see 2 tiny pinpricks of light glowing on the screen. "Not just one baby, twins. You're 2 months along." I stared unblinking at those 2 faint specks, a deafening roar echoing inside my skull. 2 months prior, Ethan and I had still been legally married, these tiny lives already growing quietly inside me, hidden from everyone's sight. "You've been under extreme emotional stress, plus you're severely run down from overworking and skipping meals, which caused you to pass out," the doctor explained, scribbling a list of prenatal vitamins and appointment dates on a prescription slip. "Make sure you rest fully and don't miss any scheduled checkups." I nodded numbly, folding the ultrasound scan, small enough to tuck deep into the innermost zipper pocket of my tote bag. This secret belonged only to me for now, and I had no intention of sharing it with anyone. I moved in with my closest friend, Zoe Bennett, the day I was released from the hospital. She worked as a senior creative director at a local advertising agency, renting a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse in a quiet residential neighborhood. The second I told her I had nowhere to stay, she immediately cleared out the larger master bedroom for me, moving all her clothes and belongings into the cramped second bedroom without a moment's hesitation. She pressed the front door key into my palm, forcing a light, casual tone to ease my overwhelming guilt. "Stay as long as you need to. Living alone gets boring anyway. I'm glad to have a roommate to keep me company." I knew her well enough to recognize the gentle kindness beneath her laid-back attitude. She hated seeing me carry all this pain alone. A few days later, Ethan's name popped up on my caller ID again, his voice heavy with exhaustion over the line. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing." I leaned back against Zoe's bedroom headboard, gazing out at the grey, overcast sky beyond the window. "About the settlement money," he hesitated. "Mum said we'll wire the full $20,000 to your bank account as soon as possible, no deductions taken out." $20,000, repeated again, as if that lump sum could erase every wound he and his mother had inflicted on me. "Okay," I replied simply. "Do you have any plans for the future?" "I haven't figured anything out yet." Ethan's voice dropped to a shaky, remorseful murmur. "Honestly, I never wanted things to end like this. But you know how stubborn my mum is, and I couldn't stand up to her." "I understand," I cut him off before he could spin another weak excuse. "There's no need to explain yourself further." Zoe walked into the bedroom a minute after I hung up, carrying a steaming mug of ginger tea, and pressed it into my cold palms. The warmth seeped through the ceramic, calming the icy tightness in my chest. Once the warmth settled in my bones, I turned to her, voicing the quiet plan I'd been turning over in my head. "Once Ethan sends over that settlement check, I want to buy a small house of my own." Zoe's eyebrows shot upward in surprise. "Buy a house? All by yourself?" "Yeah," I nodded, a quiet resolve settling in my chest. "I need a permanent space that's entirely mine." I still hadn't told her about the twins growing inside my belly. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, but I hadn't fully processed the news myself yet, and I had no idea how to put the tangled mess of pregnancy, divorce, and an uncertain future into words. Exactly 1 week later, the full $20,000 hit my checking account. I stared at the digital balance displayed on my banking app, emotions swirling in a messy storm of grief, bitterness, and fragile hope. That money represented 6 wasted years of my life, Yet it was also the starting capital for my fresh beginning. Zoe connected me with several local real estate agents, and every weekend we toured dozens of available properties together. Homes priced within my budget sat far out in the quiet suburbs, a 40-minute drive from my design firm. The townhouses close to work carried mortgage payments far beyond what I could afford. We wandered from listing to listing for weeks without finding a single space that felt like home. Then one afternoon, I passed an older residential street lined with mature oak trees and spotted a handwritten for sale flyer taped to a wooden telephone pole. The property was a tiny 2-bedroom cottage, barely 500 square feet, situated on the 5th floor of a walk-up building with no elevator. The owners were an elderly retired couple preparing to relocate across the country to live with their daughter, desperate to sell quickly without dragging their feet on negotiations. When I toured the space, the wife grabbed my hand tightly, her eyes soft with fond nostalgia for the home she'd raised her own kids in. "This place is old, sure, but the windows face south, so sunlight floods every room all year round. Warm in winter, cool in summer. We've lived here 20 years, and not a single leak has ever sprung in the roof or pipes." I glanced around the living room, noticing thriving pothos vines trailing over the balcony railing, and a kitchen counter scrubbed so clean the stainless steel appliances glinted in the natural light. A quiet, gentle sense of belonging wrapped around me, something I'd never felt in Ethan's family home. "What's the asking price?" I asked the husband, who leaned against the front door frame. "38,000 flat, but if you're serious about buying today, we'll drop it to 36,000. I ran quick mental math in my head. Over 10 years at the design firm, I'd saved roughly $15,000 of my own earnings, plus the $20,000 divorce settlement, $35,000 total, leaving a $1,000 gap I couldn't cover on my own. "I need to think it over," I told them, promising to call back the next day with my decision. That evening, I laid out the entire situation for Zoe over takeout pasta. "How much more do you need to cover the difference?" she asked immediately. $1,000. Without a second thought, she pulled her debit card out of her wallet and pressed it into my palm. "There's $3,000 in this account. Take whatever you need right now." "I can't borrow that much money from you," I tried, handing the card back, my throat tight with gratitude. "Quit acting like strangers," she insisted, shoving the card firmly into my grasp. "We're best friends. Pay me back once your freelance design work picks up, no rush whatsoever." Tears pricked my eyes at her unwavering support, and I could barely whisper her name through the lump in my throat. "All right, no more sappy tears," she waved a hand dismissively, grinning to lighten the heavy mood. "I'll take the day off tomorrow to come with you to put down the deposit." Just like that, I owned a house that belonged solely to me. The day we signed all the closing paperwork at the county recorder's office, I clutched the brand new deed tight in my fingers, a profound sense of peace settling deep in my bones. This space was mine, no shared mortgages, no judgmental in-laws, no risk of being thrown out with no warning at any moment. I answered to no one within these 4 walls. Zoe requested a full personal day off work to help me move boxes and furniture up 5 flights of narrow stairs, both of us sweating through our shirts by the time we hauled the last box into the living room. That night, we collapsed onto the bare floor of the empty living room, ordered greasy fried chicken takeout, and cracked open 2 cold cans of lemon beer to unwind. Zoe sipped her beer, turning to face me with a quiet, serious expression. "Have you figured out what you're going to do long term?" I knew exactly what she meant, and I took a slow, deep breath before speaking, my voice soft but unshakably resolute. "I'm going to carry these babies to term and raise them." Zoe's can froze halfway to her lips, and she set it down on the floor, leaning forward to lock eyes with me. "Are you absolutely certain? Raising twins alone is going to be unbelievably hard, with no partner to split the late nights, doctor's visits, or grocery runs." "I'm certain." I rested a gentle hand over my still flat abdomen, a quiet warmth blooming in my chest. "These babies are mine, and they'll have nothing to do with Ethan's family, ever." "But all the late-night feedings, emergency doctor trips, endless childcare bills, you'll be handling all of it solo." Her words hung heavy in the air, laced with genuine concern. "I know how tough it will be," I told her, "but I'll never forgive myself if I terminate this pregnancy. I can't live with that regret for the rest of my life." Zoe stayed silent for a long minute, then sighed and patted my shoulder firmly, a warm, loyal smile tugging at her lips. "All right, if this is the path you've chosen, I'm fully behind you. I already claim godmother rights, no takebacks." I laughed, and hot tears rolled down my cheeks, a mix of relief, fear, and overwhelming love for the two lives growing inside me. Once I settled into the cottage, I restructured my entire life around my pregnancy and future children. I submitted a formal request to my design firm for a 6-month unpaid leave of absence. Management agreed to hold my position open, even though my paychecks would stop entirely for the duration of the break. I accepted the terms without hesitation. My corporate salary alone would never cover the cost of prenatal care, baby supplies, and groceries for 3 people. Drawing on my decade of structural engineering expertise, I created profiles on freelance design platforms, accepting small-scale residential framing and structural drafting projects for supplementary income. The pay wasn't extravagant, but it covered monthly rent, prenatal vitamins, and grocery bills without stretching my savings thin. Severe morning sickness hit hard, starting my 3rd month of pregnancy. Every single dawn, I stumbled straight to the bathroom sink, dry heaving violently until my stomach ached. Nothing would stay down, and even the faint smell of cooking oil triggered crippling waves of nausea. Over 1 month, I lost 8 pounds of already lean body weight. At my next prenatal checkup, my doctor frowned hard at the number displayed on the medical scale, her tone sharp with worry. "You've lost significant weight during your first trimester. This is dangerous for fetal development. You need to force nutrient-dense food into your system, even if every bite makes you queasy." "I try, but I can't keep anything down," I told her with a weak, exhausted smile. She wrote a prescription for high-dose prenatal multivitamins and handed me a thick pamphlet of easy, bland meal recipes designed for women with severe hyperemesis. I carried the bag of medications out to the clinic's concrete front steps and sank down onto the cool stone, watching groups of pregnant women walk past, each supported by their husbands or mothers. A sharp surge of loneliness washed over me, a bitter ache settling in my chest. Every other expectant mother here had a support system to lean on, while I navigated every painful, scary moment completely alone. I forced the sadness away quickly, reminding myself of all the blessings I did hold close. Zoe's unwavering loyalty, a marketable career skill I could practice from home, and a safe roof over my head. Compared to people facing homelessness or no steady income at all, I had far more than enough to survive. Back home, I boiled a pot of plain chicken noodle broth and forced myself to slurp every spoonful slowly, ignoring the rolling nausea in my gut. 2 tiny lives depended on my body for nourishment, and I refused to let them suffer because I couldn't tolerate food. Days blurred into a steady, gentle routine. I spent daylight hours drafting structural blueprints for freelance clients, studied online interior design courses after dark to prepare for renovating a child-friendly nursery once the twins arrived, and met Zoe on weekends to stock up on baby clothes, bottles, and crib linens. Life moved slow and quiet. No explosive fights or harsh criticism, only calm, steady progress toward a brighter future. The peace I'd built shattered when Ethan's name flashed across my phone screen one afternoon, his voice tight and frazzled over the line. "Mia, have you heard what's happened to my mum?" There was a desperate edge to every word he spoke. She suffered severe heart failure and needs open-heart bypass surgery immediately. My pencil froze mid-sketch on the blueprint spread across my kitchen table. "No, I haven't heard anything about her hospitalization." "The operation costs close to $15,000, he explained, desperation thickening his tone. "We drained all our savings to put a down payment on a new house, so we don't have liquid cash to cover the hospital bills right now." I understood instantly what he wanted. A handout, a loan from the settlement money he'd given me months prior. "I don't have spare funds to lend," I replied evenly. "That $20,000 settlement went entirely toward purchasing my cottage, and whatever savings I have left are reserved for prenatal care and the twins' future expenses." "I'm not asking you to lend me money," he rushed to correct me, his tone shifting to pleading vulnerability. "I just beg you to come visit her in the hospital. She talks about you non-stop every single night, saying she regrets how cruel she treated you all these years." A cold, cynical laugh echoed silently inside my head. She didn't regret mistreating me. She'd only realized I carried her long-awaited grandchildren, and now she wanted to manipulate me into reconciling for the sake of the babies. "I can't make time to stop by the hospital," I told him flatly. "I'm swamped with freelance drafting work and regular prenatal appointments." "Mia, just give her 5 minutes of your time." I cut him off before he could beg further. "Ethan, we finalized our divorce months ago. Your mother's health concerns are your responsibility, not mine. Take care of her as best you can." I ended the call before he could argue more. Zoe arrived home from work an hour later, spotting my gloomy slump on the couch and pressing me to explain what had upset me. I recounted Ethan's entire phone call, word for word. "He has the audacity to reach out for help after how cruelly they threw you out." Zoe's jaw tightened with rage, her eyes blazing. "They couldn't wait to shove you onto the street when you didn't meet their ridiculous demands for a grandson, but the second his mom gets sick, suddenly you're the first person they contact?" "It doesn't matter anymore," I shook my head, attempting to brush off the hurt churning inside me. "Their problems have nothing to do with my life now." "Don't you dare soften up for them," Zoe warned, crossing her arms firmly. "Every time you give that family an inch, they'll take a full mile and drain every ounce of your peace." I didn't reply, my mind tangled in messy, conflicting thoughts. A small part of me still clung to the 6 years I'd spent living under their roof, and a faint twinge of pity tugged at my heart, thinking of Mrs. Wilson confined to a hospital bed, weak and scared. But I knew I couldn't step foot inside that ward. If they spotted my rounded belly, they'd immediately demand I reconcile with Ethan, fight for joint custody of the twins, and trap me back inside the toxic household I'd fought so hard to escape. I couldn't risk putting my unborn children through that endless cycle of fighting and blame. That night, I tossed and turned in bed for hours, unable to fall asleep. Images cycled endlessly behind my eyelids. Mrs. Wilson, pale and hooked up to IV lines in a hospital room, Ethan begging me for forgiveness, the faint twin blurs on my ultrasound scan. I rested one light palm over my slightly swollen belly, whispering a quiet promise to the 2 babies growing inside me. "Mommy will never take you back to that cold, angry house. You belong only with me, no one else." A faint, fluttering sensation brushed against my palm seconds later. Soft, light, like a butterfly's wings brushing gently against my skin. I froze, then a slow, warm smile spread across my face. That was my first feeling of fetal movement, my twins kicking to let me know they heard my voice. In that single quiet moment, all hesitation, pity, and lingering doubt melted completely away. I knew exactly what I wanted, and I would never waver from that path again. A strange, unknown number dialed my phone 2 days later. When I answered, a warm, familiar female voice spoke on the other end. Clara Hayes, Ethan's older cousin, who'd visited the Wilson household a handful of times during my marriage. "Mia? It's Clara. Do you remember me?" Her tone was gentle, cautious, as if she feared I'd hang up instantly. "I remember you, Clara. I heard through the family grapevine that you and Ethan split up," she sighed heavily, genuine sadness coloring her words. "I never imagined things would unravel this badly. My aunt's always had an unyielding, stubborn streak, and Ethan's far too weak-willed to stand up to her over anything." I listened quietly, letting her finish her explanation without interruption. "Clara," I interjected before she could launch into a speech urging reconciliation, "I appreciate you reaching out, but this chapter of my life is fully closed. I won't be going back to Ethan or his family, so there's no point trying to convince me otherwise." "I'm not here to push you to reconcile, I swear," she hurried to clarify. "I just wanted to tell you how heartbroken my aunt is in the hospital. All she does is cry every night, repeating how horribly she mistreated you all those years and how sorry she truly is." "Thank you for passing that message along," I replied calmly, "but I can't visit her. I've built a separate life for myself now, with my own burdens and obligations to manage. Please tell her to focus on recovering from her heart surgery." I wasn't heartless. 6 years of shared meals, holidays, and quiet coexistence left faint traces of compassion in my chest for Mrs. Wilson's suffering, but self-preservation came first. Crossing the threshold of that hospital room would ignite a new wave of manipulation and demands that I couldn't afford to face while carrying twins. That night, I fell into a vivid, unsettling nightmare. I was transported back to Ethan's childhood home, the same worn fabric sofa and chipped ceramic mugs lining the coffee table. Mrs. Wilson sat on the cushions, cradling a chubby, newborn baby boy against her chest, grinning widely and waving me over to admire the infant. "Mia, come look, he's your spitting image." I stepped forward to glance at the baby's face, and his tiny eyes fluttered open to smile at me. In an instant, the scene warped and shifted, and I stood alone in the county clerk's office parking lot, Ethan standing rigidly across from me, the divorce papers clutched tight in his grasp. "I'm sorry, but my mum says we can't stay married anymore." I jolted awake, gasping for air, cold sweat soaking my nightshirt, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. A soft knock tapped against my bedroom door moments later, Zoe's worried voice filtering through the wood. "Mia, are you all right in there?" "I'm fine," I panted, wiping sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. "Just a bad dream." She pushed the door open and sat down on the edge of my mattress, lacing her warm fingers through my cold, trembling ones. "What did you dream about?" "I dreamed I'd moved back in with Ethan and his mum," I whispered, the nightmare's lingering dread still clinging to my bones. Zoe rubbed slow, comforting circles across the back of my hand. "Don't worry, that life's long gone. You've got your own house, you've got me, and nothing can drag you back there again." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them, a quiet wave of guilt washing over me. Am I a terrible person for refusing to visit his mum while she's hospitalized? "Being kind doesn't mean you have to let people walk all over you," Zoe said firmly, her gaze steady and sincere. "This isn't cruelty, it's self-protection, You have every right to cut off people who spent years hurting you, no matter what anyone else might say. I wiped my wet cheeks and took a deep, grounding breath. She was right. I deserved to set firm boundaries and reject anyone who brought pain into my world. I structured rigid daily routines for myself after that sleepless night, scheduling set meal times, light afternoon walks around the neighborhood, and an early bedtime to preserve my health through the pregnancy. More freelance design clients reached out to me each week, and even though drafting blueprints for hours left my back aching, watching my savings account balance climb steadily filled me with quiet, secure pride. I signed up for an online advanced interior design certification course, planning to remodel the spare bedroom into a bright, safe nursery once the twins arrived, filling the space with soft rugs, low-shelf toy storage, and warm, dimmable lighting. By my 5th month of pregnancy, my belly protruded prominently, impossible to hide, even beneath oversized flowy knit sweaters. Zoe joked that I walked with a confident, regal stride these days, like a queen who'd finally reclaimed her throne. "You've always been a queen." She linked her arm through mine as we wandered the grocery store aisles one Saturday afternoon, tossing a carton of strawberries into our shopping trolley. "Back at Ethan's place, they treated you like a live-in maid instead of a partner." I laughed at her blunt observation and grabbed a bag of salted potato chips off the shelf, dropping it into the cart. "Hey, I thought you were cutting junk food to watch your pregnancy weight gain." Zoe's eyes widened in mock shock. "A tiny treat once a week won't hurt anyone," I winked at her. "Besides, I've got a prenatal checkup tomorrow, and the doctor's guaranteed to lecture me about calorie intake anyway." Monthly prenatal appointments were my favorite, yet most nerve-wracking days of the month. I lived for the chance to watch the twins' tiny bodies move across the ultrasound screen, yet constant anxiety lingered that something could go wrong with their development. This particular visit yielded perfect news. Both babies hit every developmental milestone on schedule, their heartbeats strong and steady on the monitor. The sonographer smiled warmly at me as she adjusted the ultrasound wand. "Your prenatal nutrition routine's working wonders. Both babies are growing exactly as they should." I stared at the two distinct silhouettes glowing on the monitor, a tender rush of love swelling in my chest. "Is it possible to tell their genders yet?" "It's still a little too early to get a clear view," she replied gently. "Come back 1 month from now, and we'll be able to see clearly. Do you have a preference for a boy or girl?" "It doesn't matter to me at all," I answered honestly. "As long as they're born healthy and whole, I'll be grateful no matter what." After everything I'd endured at the hands of Ethan's mother and her toxic obsession with male grandchildren, I'd completely abandoned any fixation on the baby's genders. All I wanted was 2 healthy children to love and raise without outside judgment or demands. I stepped out of the clinic as dusk settled over the neighborhood, streetlights flicking on one by one to cast soft golden circles across the sidewalk pavement. A faint sweet scent of osmanthus flowers drifted through the cool autumn breeze, and I rested both hands gently over my belly, speaking softly to the twins inside. "Let's head home, my little ones." My 6th month of pregnancy brought a brutal revelation that shattered every last lingering illusion I'd held about Ethan's motives for divorce. I drove to a local tile supply shop one afternoon, planning to pick out non-slip floor tiles for my small balcony renovation project. I wandered aisle after aisle, unable to locate a shade of neutral grey that matched my vision, and turned to leave when a male voice called my name from behind me. "Mia Carter?" I spun around to find a middle-aged man in a stained work uniform, a heavy metal toolbox dangling from one hand, staring at me with obvious shock. I recognized him instantly, Mr. Logan, a renovation contractor who'd completed multiple small repair jobs for our design firm years ago, before he opened his own independent contracting business. "Mr. Logan! Long time no see," I greeted him with a polite smile, glancing down at my obvious pregnant belly. "Yeah, I'm 6 months along now." "Congratulations, that's fantastic news." He grinned warmly, oblivious to the pain his next words would unleash. "Your husband must be over the moon with excitement." My smile froze tight on my face, but I chose not to unpack the messy story of my divorce, quickly shifting the subject to avoid awkward questions. "Are you working a renovation job here today?" "Yep, full home remodel for a client in the third-floor unit of that apartment building right there." He gestured toward the brick complex beside the tile shop, then tossed out a casual comment without a second thought. "Funny thing, you know the homeowner? Last name Wilson," he said. "You two are old friends." My heart lurched violently in my chest, blood turning icy cold in my veins. I fought to keep my voice even and steady as I asked, "Wilson? What's his first name?" "Ethan Wilson." Mr. Logan scratched the back of his neck, recalling the details of their contract. "He hired me roughly 3 or 4 months ago, right after you two split up, wanted all construction finished before winter so they could move in, mentioned his new wife's pregnant, needed a fully renovated nursery ready for the baby." New wife, pregnant. Those 2 short phrases stabbed straight through my heart like twin kitchen knives. "Who's his new wife?" I heard my own voice tremble faintly, barely above a whisper. "Never met her face to face," he shook his head. "Only heard Ethan say she's a few years younger than him, really pretty from how he described her." I stood rigid in the middle of the tile shop's aisle, every limb numb, as the full truth crashed down over me. Mrs. Wilson's endless complaints about my failure to produce a son had never been the real reason for our divorce. Ethan had already been cheating on me, planning a new life with another woman, long before he dragged me to the county clerk's office to sign the papers. Every harsh word, every unfair accusation, every night spent alone in our bed had all been a carefully constructed lie to justify abandoning me for his new lover. "You don't look so well, Mia." Mr. Logan noticed my Asian complexion, stepping forward with concern. "Are you feeling dizzy?" "I'm fine. Just stood for too long browsing tile samples." I forced a thin, shaky smile, turning to rush out of the store without another word. I practically fled to my car, my vision blurred by unshed tears. Back home, I locked myself inside the bedroom and sank down onto the edge of the mattress, staring blankly at a faint grey scuff mark on the wall left behind during moving day, a mark I'd never gotten around to scrubbing off. I replayed every argument, every quiet evening, every half-hearted apology Ethan had offered me over 6 years, realizing I'd been nothing more than a disposable placeholder until he found someone younger and more compliant to give him the son his mother craved. I unlocked my phone and pulled up Ethan's contact profile, my finger hovering over the call button for minutes on end. What good would confronting him do? We were legally separated. He was free to date and marry whoever he pleased, and screaming accusations would only drag me back into the toxic drama I'd worked so hard to escape. Hot tears spilled onto my bedsheets as I sat in silent heartbreak for hours. Zoe arrived home after work to find my eyes puffy and red, and I spilled every detail of my run-in with Mr. Logan, along with the horrifying truth of Ethan's hidden affair and new home purchase. Zoe stayed silent for a long minute, then let out a sharp, frustrated curse under her breath. I knew something was off from the very start of all this. Even with his mother breathing down his neck, he could have stood his ground if he actually loved you. He had a whole new relationship lined up before he even filed for divorce. I curled my knees up against my chest on the couch, staring at the wooden floor without speaking. "You can't just let him get away with this," Zoe argued, sitting down beside me. "You deserve to demand compensation, make him answer for cheating on you while you were still married, while you were carrying his twins without knowing it." "There's no point," I shook my head, numbness settling over my heart. What would confronting him accomplish? Force him to write me a bigger check? Make him kneel and beg for forgiveness? Even if I got both, I couldn't erase the 6 years I wasted on him, or go back to the person I was before all this hurt. Zoe's mouth fell open, no rebuttal, ready to counter my quiet logic. I reached out to grip her hand tightly, a quiet sense of clarity washing over me. I refuse to waste the remaining months of my pregnancy fighting a man who's not worth a single ounce of my energy. My priority is protecting these twins and building a happy life for us 3. Living well without him is the only meaningful revenge I need. Zoe's eyes filled with warm, emotional tears as she studied my calm, resolute expression. "You've changed so much. A year ago, you would have locked yourself away crying for days, then found some excuse to forgive him entirely." "That's because I had nothing to fall back on before." I rested one gentle palm over my rounded belly, feeling the twins shift and kick inside me. "Now I have these 2 babies, a house that's mine, a steady freelance career, and you. I don't need anyone else to support me." Zoe pulled me into a tight, comforting hug, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "I was terrified you'd spiral into self-destruction after hearing all this news." "I won't break," I patted her back gently, a faint, hopeful smile tugging at my lips. "I still have to watch you get married and have kids someday. I can't afford to fall apart now." After that day, I erased every last trace of lingering softness toward Ethan and his family from my heart. I threw myself fully into preparing for the twins' arrival, ordering 2 solid wooden cribs online, purchasing low VOC pastel paint to refresh the spare bedroom into a nursery, and stocking shelves with diapers, bottles, swaddle blankets, and tiny onesies. Zoe joked that I'd emptied the entire baby supply store's inventory, but I told her thorough preparation was the only way to feel secure about single motherhood. At my 7th-month ultrasound appointment, the sonographer confirmed the twins' genders with a bright, delighted grin. "Congratulations! 1 little boy, 1 little girl. A perfect boy-girl twin pair." I clutched the printed ultrasound scan to my chest, hot tears streaming down my cheeks. But these tears were pure, unfiltered joy this time, no trace of sorrow mixed in. I returned home and stepped out onto the back balcony, gazing out at the vibrant orange sunset bleeding across the distant rooftops. I stroked my belly softly, whispering to the 2 children growing inside me. "Mommy will give you both every single good thing life has to offer." A few weeks later, Ethan's number popped up on my phone again, his voice raw and desperate as he begged for help. "Mia, I need you to do me one huge favor." "What's wrong?" I asked flatly, no emotion coloring my tone. "My mum's heart condition worsened drastically," he explained, exhaustion thickening every syllable. "Doctors scheduled a second emergency bypass surgery, and I can't scrape together enough cash to cover the hospital bills." "I thought you borrowed money from relatives and maxed out your credit cards to cover the first operation," I replied, recalling our earlier conversation. "That only barely covered the initial fees," he admitted. "This second surgery's far more expensive, and I'm completely out of options." A long, guilty pause followed before he spoke again. "Could you lend me $5,000? I'll pay every cent back the second my paychecks catch up." $5,000 was every spare dollar I'd earned from freelance drafting over the past 2 months, a dedicated emergency fund set aside for the twins' hospital delivery fees pediatric checkups, and unexpected childcare costs. I couldn't sacrifice my children's safety net to bail Ethan out of his own financial mistakes. "I can't lend you that money," I told him firmly. "Why not?" His voice shot up an octave, sharp with entitled anger. "You received $20,000 in divorce settlement money. You live alone in a small house. You don't have many expenses. You've got all that cash sitting unused. That settlement money paid for my home's down payment and closing costs." I cut him off sharply, no longer willing to tolerate his selfish demands. "Every dollar of that compensation belongs to me, earned through 6 years of unappreciated sacrifice, and you have zero right to ask for any of it back. Also, I know all about the new house you purchased and renovated for your new girlfriend while your mother couldn't afford her first heart surgery. How can you afford brand new home renovations, yet not cover your own parents' medical bills? Doesn't that strike you as deeply hypocritical?" He rushed to scramble for a weak defense. "That house was purely a real estate investment property, not a gift for her." "Save your excuses for someone who'll believe them," I interrupted coldly. "I don't care about your personal finances anymore. Solve your family's medical problems on your own and stop contacting me to beg for money." A year earlier, I would have caved to his pleas, emptied my savings account to ease his suffering, and ignored my own needs in the process. Now, the twins depended on me to prioritize their safety and stability, and I would never gamble their future to help a man who'd discarded me without remorse. Zoe listened to the full story after I hung up the phone, pumping a fist in triumphant approval. "That's exactly how you should handle him. Every time you give that family an inch, they demand a mile more." "I just regret how quickly I blew through that $20,000 settlement on buying the house," I murmured quietly. "If I'd held on to more cash, I could have set aside more for the twins' early childhood expenses." "Don't dwell on past choices," Zoe waved off my regret. "That house is your safe haven, the best investment you could have possibly made. Focus on growing your freelance business and preparing for the babies instead of mourning money you already put to good use." I nodded, yet a faint unease lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet worry that Ethan and his mother wouldn't accept my refusal so easily. 3 days later, my fears materialized into a messy confrontation. I'd laid down for a midday nap when loud, shrill shouting echoed up from the sidewalk beneath my apartment window. My name screamed repeatedly for the entire neighborhood to hear. I crossed to the window and pulled back the curtain, spotting Mrs. Wilson standing down below, leaning heavily on a wooden walking cane, her face twisted with rage as she craned her neck upward to yell my name. "Mia Carter, come down here right now." My heart skipped a beat with shock. She was supposed to be recovering from heart surgery in the hospital. How had she traveled across town to track down my address? I hesitated for a minute, then slipped on a lightweight cardigan and headed down the 5 flights of stairs to face her. The second she laid eyes on me, her gaze locked instantly onto my massively rounded pregnant belly, her eyes bulging wide with stunned disbelief. "You're pregnant? Who's the father?" "This is my child," I answered simply, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a full explanation. "I asked if Ethan's the dad." She stumbled forward a shaky step, nearly losing her balance on the concrete sidewalk, her voice cracking with desperate emotion. "If you'd told us you were carrying his baby months ago, I never would have pushed Ethan to sign those divorce papers." "You never cared whether I was pregnant or not," I replied calmly, unshaken by her outburst. "The only thing you've ever obsessed over is getting a grandson to carry your family name." "You're holding this against me?" Her face flushed bright red with anger, lips trembling uncontrollably. "I'm not blaming you. I'm only stating the plain truth." Mrs. Wilson froze in place, unable to form a single retort, then suddenly burst into messy, tearful sobs, gripping her cane tightly to steady her swaying frame. "Mia, I'm so sorry for every cruel word I spoke to you over the years. Forgive me, please. Reconcile with Ethan, and we'll be a whole family again." "That can never happen," I said, without a shred of hesitation. "But you're carrying his twins." She wiped streaming tears from her cheeks, begging desperately. "Children shouldn't grow up without their biological father present in their lives." "I decide what's best for my children," I cut her off, switching to a formal, distant title for the first time since our marriage ended. "Ma'am, I call you that out of basic respect for your age, but I ask that you respect my boundaries in return. I'm no longer your daughter-in-law, and you have no authority to demand anything from me." She stared at me blankly, as if seeing an entirely unfamiliar woman standing before her, muttering in quiet confusion. "You've changed completely. You used to comply with everything I asked without argument." "I spent 6 years swallowing every hurt and complying with every unfair demand," I told her flatly. "I'm done silencing myself to keep other people comfortable. I have 2 children to protect now, and I'll never sacrifice my own peace to satisfy your family's wishes again." I turned to walk back toward the building's front entrance, her desperate voice calling out after me. "Mia, are you really going to abandon me when I'm sick and sorry?" I paused mid-step, but refused to glance backward at her. "You are not my mother. A real mother would never spend years making her daughter-in-law miserable over something out of her control." Seconds later, Ethan came sprinting down the sidewalk to his mother's side, grabbing my arm gently to hold me back from climbing the stairs, his voice thick with desperate tears. "Let's fix this, Mia. Marry me again, and I swear I'll never let my mum mistreat you or the twins ever again. I'll devote all my time to taking care of you and our kids." "It's too late." I pulled my arm free from his light grasp. "What do you mean, too late?" Confusion clouded his tear-streaked face. "The moment you put your signature on those divorce papers and chose to walk away from me, our future together vanished completely," I told him plainly. "Live your own life quietly and leave me and my children in peace." From that afternoon onward, I severed every last thread connecting me to Ethan and his family, vowing never to allow them to disrupt my quiet, peaceful life again. 1 week before my due date, I checked myself into the maternity ward of the local hospital. Zoe submitted a formal request to take unpaid annual leave from her advertising agency, staying by my bedside 24 hours a day without a single complaint. She grew far more anxious than I was, pestering every nurse and doctor with endless questions about labor risks, recovery timelines, and twin care protocols, until the medical staff playfully teased her for being my overprotective support system. "Relax," I laughed, propping myself up on the hospital bed's stacked pillows. "I'm the one who's actually going through labor, not you." "How can I stay calm?" Zoe fussed over my packed labor bag, double-checking I'd brought every baby outfit and blanket we'd purchased. "This is your first delivery, and you don't have a partner here to help through all the pain." Despite her worry, I harbored no fear deep down. I wasn't navigating this monumental milestone alone. I had Zoe's unwavering loyalty, the 2 tiny babies waiting to meet me, and a heart forged strong after years of hardship and self-reliance. Labor pains kicked off in the early hours of the 3rd night of my hospital stay, sharp, brutal contractions tearing through my lower abdomen like a hot blade slicing through muscle. I clamped both hands tight around the hospital bed's metal railings, sweat soaking through my thin cotton hospital gown as each wave of agony crashed over me. Zoe laced her fingers through mine, her own eyes glistening with tears as she whispered constant encouragement to push through the pain. Once my cervix fully dilated, Nurses wheeled me into the delivery room, and a single determined thought echoed non-stop inside my head. I have to survive this labor for my twins, for the new life I've built alone, for every hard choice I've made to reach this moment. After hours of grueling pushing, 2 clear, loud infant cries split the sterile silence of the operating room, bright and pure, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The delivering obstetrician smiled down at me, holding up the 2 swaddled newborns for me to see. "Congratulations, Mum, 1 healthy baby boy and 1 perfect baby girl, both with strong heartbeats and full healthy weight." I collapsed back against the delivery table, every muscle in my body drained of energy, straining my head to catch a glimpse of the 2 tiny bundles wrapped in soft white hospital blankets. Their eyes were squeezed shut tight, tiny pink mouths opening and closing in sleepy little yawns, delicate limbs curled up like tiny kittens. Happy, relieved tears flooded my eyes, streaming down my temples to soak the paper hospital pillow beneath my head. "My babies," I whispered hoarsely, stretching a weak arm toward them, only for a nurse to gently press my shoulder back down onto the table. "Rest first. You can hold them once your vital signs stabilize." I closed my eyes, a wide, genuine smile tugging at my exhausted lips. I'd accomplished the impossible. I'd escaped a toxic marriage, purchased my own home, survived a brutal pregnancy alone, and brought 2 healthy children into the world, all without relying on anyone else's support. Zoe rushed into the delivery room the second nurses permitted visitors, bursting into simultaneous tears and laughter as she stared at the twin infants. "They're so tiny, absolutely perfect." She carefully lifted the baby girl into her arms, her movements stiff and awkward, terrified of accidentally hurting the fragile newborn. "Mia, look, her facial features match yours exactly." I smiled weakly, my heart overflowing with overwhelming pure happiness I'd never experienced before. "Have you picked out names for them yet?" Zoe asked, rocking the baby girl gently in her arms. "I've had them planned for months," I told her softly. "The older boy is Leo Carter, and our little girl is Leela Carter. Leo for peace, Leela for serenity. I want them to live calm, safe, quiet lives, free from conflict and pain." "Leo and Leela Carter," Zoe repeated the names slowly, a warm grin spreading across her face. "Such gentle, lovely names, perfect for your 2 little ones." I spent 5 full days recovering in the hospital before being cleared to return to my cottage. Once we crossed the threshold of my front door, I laid Leo and Leela side by side in their matching wooden cribs, watching their peaceful sleeping faces and feeling a profound, unshakable sense of safety settle over my entire home. The months that followed blurred into a constant stream of exhausting, joyful labor. Midnight feedings, endless diaper changes, rocking fussy babies back to sleep, warm sponge baths before bedtime. Every task left me drained beyond measure, yet I cherished every single messy, tender second with my twins. Zoe rushed straight to my house immediately after finishing work every evening, rushing to the nursery to coo over Leo and Leela. She quickly mastered mixing formula, fastening swaddle blankets, and soothing crying babies, growing far more skilled at infant care than I was in those sleep-deprived early weeks. "You're a better godmother than most birth mothers," I teased her one evening, watching her rock a colicky Leela in her arms. "Obviously," she lifted her chin playfully, pride shining in her eyes. "I'm aiming to win the official World's Best Godmother award." Leo and Leela grew quickly, their monthly wellness checkups yielding glowing reports from the pediatrician. At their 1-month exam, the doctor shook her head in quiet admiration after reviewing their weight and height charts. Raising twin infants alone is incredibly challenging, Yet you've nurtured both of them perfectly. They're hitting every growth milestone ahead of schedule. I couldn't manage without my best friend's constant help, I smiled, glancing over at Zoe, who'd tagged along to the appointment to keep me company. On the drive home from the clinic, I pushed the double stroller down a tree-lined neighborhood walking trail, warm spring sunlight filtering through oak leaves to cast dappled gold streaks across the pavement. I glanced down at Leo and Leela dozing peacefully side by side inside the stroller, my chest swelling with a deep, unshakable sense of contentment. Every step of this difficult journey had been my own choice, filled with hardship and heartache, yet every single step had led me to this quiet, perfect happiness. Later that night, after rocking the twins to sleep in their nursery, I sat alone on the back balcony, watching the thousands of glowing house lights stretch across the city skyline. My cell phone buzzed with an unknown incoming call, and I answered cautiously. "Is this Mia Carter?" A woman's calm, neutral voice filtered through the speaker. "This is Mia speaking. I'm Sarah Wilson, Ethan's current wife. I'd like to discuss something with you." My heart skipped a small beat of surprise, yet my tone remained steady and unruffled. "What would you like to talk about?" "I know about your past marriage to Ethan, and I'm aware you've given birth to his twin children," she explained without malice or anger. "I only need to confirm one thing. Do you intend to reconcile with Ethan at any point in the future?" A quiet, amused huff escaped my lips. "You have absolutely nothing to worry about. Ethan and I are permanently finished, with zero chance of reconciliation. I've built a complete, fulfilling life with my 2 children, and I'm very happy with how things stand. Please pass a message along to Ethan. Stop reaching out to me or disrupting my household." "I understand fully. Thank you for being straightforward with me." "No need to thank me," I replied evenly. "I wish you peace and happiness for your own life." I hung up the phone and tilted my head upward to gaze at the dark night sky, thousands of bright stars twinkling down like 2 tiny infant eyes winking at me from above. I rested a gentle palm over my empty belly, whispering quietly into the cool night air. "Mommy loves you more than anything, Leo and Leela." 3 full years slipped by in the blink of an eye. "Mommy! Mommy!" 3-year-old Leo sprinted across the park's green grass toward me, clutching a tiny wild daisy plucked from the flower bed, holding it up to my chest like a precious treasure. "This flower is for you." I knelt down to meet his eye level, taking the delicate white flower and pressing a soft kiss to his chubby cheek. "Thank you, my sweet boy." Leela trotted along behind her brother, her small fist squeezed tight around a crumpled, wilted flower stem, holding it out to me with big, hopeful eyes. "My flower for Mommy, too." "Lila's flower is just as beautiful," I told her, pressing a matching kiss to her forehead, and she broke into a bright, giggling smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. It was a warm spring Saturday, and I'd brought the twins to the city's Central Park for the whole afternoon to run and play on the playground equipment. Families spread blankets across the lawn everywhere, parents chasing their laughing toddlers, barbecues sizzling at picnic pavilions, children flying colorful kites high into the blue sky. I settled onto a wooden park bench to watch Leo and Leela chase one another across the grass, a soft, permanent smile fixed on my face as I absorbed every joyful sound they made. 1,095 days had passed since the twins' birth, from fragile swaddled newborns to energetic, talkative preschoolers. Those 3 years had forced me to learn countless survival skills, cooking full meals while balancing one toddler on my hip, completing a full shower in 5 rushed minutes flat, soothing screaming sick children through sleepless midnight hours without breaking down into tears, and suppressing every wave of exhaustion so my kids never saw me overwhelmed. I'd also undergone a profound personal transformation over those years. I'd stepped away from full-time structural engineering drafting to launch my own independent residential interior design studio, specializing in family-friendly, child-safe home remodels. My small business earned glowing word-of-mouth reviews from local clients, and design commissions poured in steadily enough to provide a comfortable, stable income for my little family. 12 months prior, I'd fully repaid the $3,000 Zoe had lent me for my cottage down payment and gifted her a 2-week international beach vacation as a heartfelt thank you for every hour of support she'd given me through my darkest days. Zoe pulled me into a tight hug at the airport before her flight, her voice thick with proud emotion. "You glow with such quiet confidence now. You're nothing like the broken, defeated woman who moved into my apartment 3 years ago." She was entirely correct. The old Mia, who'd spent 6 years shrinking into the background of Ethan's family, swallowing every hurt to avoid conflict, was gone forever. The woman I'd become owned a thriving creative business, a loyal circle of supportive friends, 2 healthy, loving children, and a cozy home that belonged solely to me. I no longer needed anyone's approval or financial support to feel complete. I carried my own strength within myself. "Mummy, I'm thirsty." Leela trotted over to tug lightly at the hem of my linen sundress, her small voice soft and sweet. I pulled an insulated water bottle from my canvas tote bag, pouring a small cup of cool filtered water for her to sip, and she darted back to rejoin Leo's game of tag once she'd finished drinking. I watched their tiny running figures, my mind drifting back to the terrible afternoon I'd signed the divorce papers and collapsed unconscious in the county clerk's lobby. If I'd caved to Ethan and his mother's relentless pressure to stay trapped in that miserable marriage, what would my life look like now? I'd still be drowning under endless criticism about my inability to produce a son, suppressing my own dreams to cater to their every unreasonable demand, slowly hardening into a bitter, resentful woman with no identity outside of wife and daughter-in-law. Thankfully, I'd chosen to walk away and rebuild my life from scratch. "Mia?" A weary, familiar male voice pulled me out of my quiet reflection. I twisted around to spot Ethan standing several feet behind the bench, his frame thinner and gaunter than I remembered, dark hair thinning significantly at his temples, deep permanent wrinkles etched beneath his tired eyes. He wore a faded, threadbare cotton jacket, his entire posture radiating defeat and exhaustion. "I almost didn't believe it was you when I spotted you across the lawn," he said, his gaze sweeping over me, then lingering long on Leo and Leela chasing butterflies across the grass. "What brings you to the park today?" I asked, my tone calm, neutral, no trace of lingering anger or sadness in my voice. "I brought my son from my second marriage to play in the sandpit over there." He nodded toward a plastic playground sandbox a short distance away, where a small boy roughly Leo's age knelt scooping sand with a cheap plastic shovel. "You remarried after we split up?" I asked, already knowing the answer from Sarah's phone call months prior. "I did." He let out a bitter, hollow laugh, his shoulders slumping forward. "We finalized our divorce last year. She said I couldn't earn enough money to support her lifestyle and left me for another man. My son lives with me full-time now, and my mother watches him while I work long construction shifts." I listened without a flicker of sympathy or malicious satisfaction, only quiet, gentle sorrow for the path he'd chosen to walk. Once, Ethan had carried a bright, cocky confidence, convinced he could have any life he desired simply by picking and choosing who to discard along the way. Now he reaped every painful consequence of his selfish choices. "How have you been all these years?" He lifted his gaze back to me, his eyes heavy with unspoken regret. "Life is wonderful," I replied simply, glancing fondly toward my twins. "Those two kids, they're mine, aren't they?" His voice cracked with quiet longing, staring at Leo and Leela's matching soft brown eyes, identical to his own. I chose not to answer his question directly, unwilling to let him claim any paternal connection to the children I'd raised entirely alone without his help. "Ethan," I spoke gently, firmly drawing a boundary between our separate lives. "All the pain and regret from our past is long behind us. I'm happy with the life I've built, and I truly hope you can find peace in yours as well."